Hey, welcome to another episode of the podcast Uninterrupted with DST. How you doing today, DST? Pretty good. I PSX was with me on a space earlier today. Well, earlier in my day anyway. I think it was late last night for him, and we actually had a blast talking about all kinds of things outside of crypto, even.
Brilliant. I'd be happy to do the same in this one then, if that's the case, because my limited knowledge of crypto.
Well, we can definitely do that because this is more about getting to know who you are. And I mean, surely we're going to talk a little bit about Luna Classic and some crypto, but we can talk about anything else.
Excellent. Excellent. Sounds good. Well, it's for a change. I'm staring out a window at a beautiful Scottish sunny day, so I should be out golfing instead of doing this, because we don't get very many beautiful sunny Scottish days. Like,
Oh, so I'm keeping you from a game?
nah, you're not keeping me from one. I'm just saying I should be out playing because there's very rare that you can say it's a beautiful sunny day in Scotland.
Because usually
It's
it's.
normally it's normally pissing down with rain. In other words.
Oh, okay. Is it like a mist usually, or is it like a downpour?
Well, where I come from, very much so, because I live on the northeast coast of Scotland. So we get what we term as a har, which basically means when cold air hits warm air, and it causes a fog-like mist to come in. So yeah, we have a propensity for a lot of fog. But when it's beautiful, it's beautiful. I live next to one of the best beaches, in my opinion, humbly in the world. So. And I've been around the world, so I can reasonably comment. So yeah, I live in a beautiful part of the world.
How fast do the cars rust over there?
Sorry, how fast? Sorry, say that again.
Yeah, how fast do cars rust over there?
Oh, badly. We've got a lot of salt content in the air, so it's it's not something you want to invest in a pristine car or a car of any great value.
Gotcha. I thought there might be an issue because you said that there's always moisture in the air, and then as soon as the wind hits, cold wind hits just right, you have rain every time.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, but when it's sunny, it's a beautiful part of the world to live in. When it's not, it's still a beautiful part of the world to live in. It's got its own variations of. It packs a lot into a small country.
Is it like the Pacific Northwest in the U.S. where it rains 70% of the time or 80% of the time?
Ironically, not. I'm overplaying it slightly. In the actual east coast of Scotland is drier than the west coast of Scotland. If you live in the west coast of Scotland, which is places that you probably know of note, Glasgow as one example is the west coast of Scotland. I live on Aberdeen side of Scotland, and the west coast. You're lucky if you get a few days of sunshine a year. It's predominantly very rainy on their side,
So are you a
but they also
Highlander?
get.
Are you a Highlander?
I am by birth. I was born in a place which is past Inverness, which is the Highland capital. So I was very much a Highlander. I had a father who was from the northeast and a mother who was from the far north. But ironically, I grew up in Hong Kong.
Oh wow, that's cool. So I'm not I'm sort of familiar with the history, but I'm not from there, so I don't really know. Is there a lot of people that have, say, Danish blood or Saxon blood, or because there was a lot of invasions?
Yeah, there's a lot of cross mixes in the I think going back millennia in Scotland. The interesting historical ones are that we were the only country that remained undefeated by the Romans. So they never managed to get over Hadrian. They built a wall to keep us out, and the English kept it in place for several centuries afterwards. So,
Hadrian's Wall,
but
right? Is that right?
there's there's a lot of in my part of the world, because I'm in the northeast, and obviously directly opposite us is your Scandi countries like Denmark, Sweden, etc., where in quotes the Vikings came from. So we have in the northeast of Scotland, there's a lot of dialects in Scotland. You could literally travel 5 miles, and even though we're a very underpopulated country relative to the size of the landmass, um, you'll find that someone 5 miles down the road speaks with a completely different accent to me, as an example. And likewise, a lot of the language that we speak in the northeast is called Doric, spelled Doric, for those who've got an interest. And a lot of the words within it are a mix of Scandi words. There's quite a lot of Scandinavian words within that. So yeah, the Vikings must have done a bit of raping, pillaging, and plunging in this neck of the woods.
Well, that is awesome. And you know, that was one of my favorite movies growing up was Highlander, actually. I thought it was really good.
Very historically incorrect, a bit like Braveheart, several centuries incorrect, but it was good. Hollywood made a good job of it.
Yeah, you're talking about Braveheart, yeah. I think Highlander is more fantasy, but it still kind of brought everybody. Well, Sean Connery also brought attention to Scotland too. Let's not forget that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
There's a TV show, and I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but a woman travels back in time, and I want to say that is also based on Scotland. I believe it's in that area, but I might be wrong.
It's a funny thing, actually, Jerry. I think I've mentioned this to you in a very late night space one night. I actually worked in Germany. I ran a business in Germany for a couple of years, and I worked for an American company who had the exclusive rights to sell vehicles, cars, etc., to the American military, and they were the only ones who were allowed to do it on base, as in physically on camp. And the amount of Americans I had walk through my door that I sold cars to who told me they could trace their genealogy back to the Scots. Everyone wants to be a Scotsman, you know. So, but yeah, there's plenty that walked through my doors that I sold cars to based on my accent. So,
That is pretty cool because I don't know. I think most of the people, when you go to the U.S. and you travel around, you can kind of get a feel for where people came from because it's from what I know, and I'm only know where my family settled and the area that I'm from. Right, I didn't really dig deep in other places, but it's mostly German and Dutch where I'm from. So there's bound to be other settlement locations throughout the United States that are heavier, Scottish, heavier Irish, things like that. And I'm talking outside the cities. So I'm assuming there's farmers in England and farmers in Scotland. So I'm assuming.
oh, huge. Well, they estimate to put that into some sort of context with Scotland, joking apart, the current population of Scotland's in and around about 5.5 million people, and they estimate had the Highland clearances not taken part, which was basically where the English, after the final armed conflict between Scotland and England in 1745, once they'd basically routed us, they then decided to give all the land to noblemen or gentry, if you want to put it that way, to the clans who'd backed them. And what they basically did was they moved all the people off the land and sheep onto the land. It was one of the worst things in history. But they estimate that with the numbers that left to go or were forcibly removed and went to Canada, America, Australia, all points of the globe, that Scotland to date would have a population approaching about 25.5 million. So that gives you some idea as to what happened.
So there's definitely some
We'd have been a
immigrants
significantly
over here.
larger. Yeah, basically. So they shipped all the ones out to, well, Canada. You've got like Nova Scotia, which directly translated means New Scotland, as one example. And you've got huge populaces of people within the states itself, in various pockets around. Like they do an NYC day now in New York, which is a tartan day to celebrate their lineage back to the home country. So yeah, there's more Scots outside of Scotland than there is in Scotland of Scottish heritage.
So let's get to some crypto talk. What brought you to crypto? Tell us about your initial exposure to it.
Sure. As I've said to you, in conversation before, and I've said to plenty of other people, I'm not a crypto OG. I came to the party probably relatively late. Realistically, started or roundabout started looking at it with any intent probably about 2018-19, researching it, finding out if what it was all about, bar the obvious Bitcoin. Bought my first coins tokens in 2020. I think it was ETH, with a view to the two primary areas that I went in and became involved in was staking and farming. Studied them and started getting involved with that. and went into various different pools, some with success, some with others, some without. I had a very poor instant in and around the end of 2021, 2022, which I lost a not insignificant amount of money to a fairly elaborate scam. I won't go into any great detail about it, but suffice to say, it was a sore one for me, possibly not for other people, but it was in reasonably high five figures. So yeah, it gave me a proverbial kick in the nuts. I always knew, was very aware of the fact that there was a lot of nefarious people involved in crypto, which was why I sort of kept it at arm's length for as long as I did. But after that event, I sort of made a conscious decision. I've always had a strong moral compass. Like to believe I was brought up well. I'm not saying that I'm a perfect individual, a perfect person, but I like to believe I choose to stand up for the ordinary man or the ordinary woman. And from that point forward, I made it my point or intent to shine a big bright light on anyone that I saw was doing nefarious activities, or in my opinion was doing something with ill intent involved. Some people that rubs up the wrong way tends to be the ones who are doing the ill intent. They really don't like me, but doesn't cause me to lose sleep at night. And beyond that, the involvement from directly with Lunk, like everyone, I wasn't involved. I wasn't a lunar investor, a pre-lunar investor, pre-crash. I watched with absolute horror the crash, like everyone else, to see something of such high value basically be reduced to zero in the space of time it was beyond comprehension at the time. To be quite honest with you, I find it very, very hard to compute. I more or less at that point had made a mental decision to divest all interest I had remaining in crypto out, and walk away and just call it a draw. I was ahead, marginally ahead from where I started, even with the big loss that I'd incurred. I'd done reasonably well in recovery, and like most people, I think you could have thrown a stick at stuff in 2021 and made money, to a lot of it. But for something, I don't know what it was. Others people have said it as well, and it seems to be this weird draw that I can't explain it. I genuinely can't. There's no logical rhyme or reason, but suffice to say, I thought, right, I'll jump in, and I bought a few million lug, and then I looked at other coins that I was maybe humming and hawing about, and I had a fairly balanced and broad portfolio at that time, probably too many coins, and I traded out of a few more, and I kept on seeming to trade out and trade into Lunk until I was sitting on I'm not a whale by any stretch of the imagination, but a reasonably significant bag of Lunk. And probably the main reason was I saw this gathering of people, this group of people that seemed intent on doing something good out of something extremely bad. And it really drew me in. Slowly but surely, I'd start speaking to people in the community. I was joining Diamond Hands original calls that went on for hours and hours and hours, as we all know, and the various other AMAs and spaces, and just sat. I'm a listener. I'm the guy that sits drinking a coffee, watching the world go by, and observing other people. That's what I was doing primarily, but trying to think of a way that I could possibly contribute or otherwise. Our own relationship, as you well know, came about through a late night space. We were chatting, seemed to find common ground as to mindset and what we hoped to achieve with the community, but we felt it required direction, which I think we probably both agree it still does.
Oh yeah.
And I got involved initially with yourself in setting up the holocracy side of things with other members of guys that are on here just now. Didn't possibly go according to plan. I sort of stepped back from it a bit, wasn't as involved. I wrote some of the initial papers and stuff like that, and then I let you guys run with it. And I just sat in the sort of shadows watching what everyone was doing and various other things. And as it's pretty well documented, most people know me, I think, to some extent, for the fact that I tend to, or I've had a few noted battles with people within the community. Battles possibly not being the operative word, but intense discussion, because I didn't feel that they were possibly doing things that had Lunk as their number one priority, as opposed to self-interest. I'd like to believe that over the course of the last 9 months, I've been proved pretty correct on everything that I said, even though I was told that I was wrong, and on various occasions I've been proved pretty much right. Doesn't make me fill me with glee, because I really don't like the constant, and I mean it's draining. It's emotionally draining. It's mentally draining. This constant battle of wills that's going on between various factions, um, for control of Lunk. And to put it in my succinct words, I've never seen so many people fight so viciously and vicariously over something of zero value, or that they tell us has zero value, inherent value, and yet they're all still here trying to control it. Why? So that's why I'm still here.
Well, I think it'll be a sad day when the fighting stops, maybe.
Possibly, yeah. There's the counter argument, and people have said, rightly or wrongly, that when the debate stops, that's when you know you really are dead. So there is a certain degree of truth in that. The fact that we're all still here, and that the space has been had, and various people coming up with suggestions for things like, Drifter and Duncan with the repeg. Various other people are coming forward with other ideas. People are trying to build, genuinely build, in the community, which I applaud. I'm not a builder. I'm not a dev. I don't come at it from a coding perspective. I'm completely ignorant where code's concerned, but I'm a quick learner, and I'm reasonably au fait with what they're trying to achieve. I think what from a personal perspective, I'd just like to see a little bit of stability. Now, first quarter we got through, yeah, there was problems with certain elements of what happened with L1. Were they perfect? No, not at all. Did they hide? Absolutely not. When there was issues, I felt they were addressed publicly. There's other people who would argue that debate with me, but I would just like to see a little bit of parity where the community can settle down, get to where we need to go from a technical perspective, and then, as I've told LBA on several occasions as one example, then you're down to POV, proof of value. Because once you've hit the technical parity, you've then got to really, really justify any spend that you make after that. That if I spend X, I'm going to get back Y, because that is what any diligent business would do.
Right.
You've got to see a return against your investment.
ROI, it's important. So, with that said, you said you weren't a
Absolutely.
dev. What is your background?
Entrepreneurial, if you want to put it that way, sales, marketing, my entire adult life. I currently run a couple of relatively small businesses in the UK, in Scotland specifically, which are advertising related. And that's what pays the bills at this point in time. Beyond that, I've worked in corporate, I've worked in direct, I've worked in retail, I've worked in virtually every genre of sales that you can think of.
So it seems pretty business diverse. Now, I'd said many times that I'd like to see a little bit more structure, and it's kind of hard to do that with crypto. But wouldn't it be nice to? We have some sort of structure there right now, but if we had a system to, of accountability to keep people's hands out of the cookie jar, and some form of management, I guess it seems like it looks centralized, right? How does that happen in your eyes with cryptocurrency and something that's in DeFi?
It's the
I don't know the answer either, man.
imponderable, isn't it? Yeah, it's how do you give an easy answer to that one? In truth, my opinion is going to grate against a lot of people, i.e., your DeFi evangelists and your decentralized evangelists, etc., etc. Because I think, if anything, that the last 9, 12 months has demonstrated through our own governance issues, is that it's very hard to govern something that has no governance, or no structure in play, real structure in place. To me, we are a business. You cannot have an entity which is worth a floating value as it has been between one and sort of like 500,000 and 2 billion over the last sort of 12 months, and not have some sort of, if you like, head CEO, somebody that you can physically go to and say, right, what's going on, a technical department and a sales department and a legal department, all the things that have been discussed to death, via holocracy, via other mediums, via, the Senate idea that I listened to, again, being discussed on Trev's video with Zardar the other night. But I think, as an example, my own personal perspective, I think the biggest threat to the chain at this juncture is the fact that we have validators who are undoxed to anybody. I'm not talking about public doxing. I'm not talking about. I don't need anybody to shout their name, address, and whatever details out to me as a private investor. But to me, there should be a body of control, be that TGF or another, who has public record of who these people are. Because, and the number one reason, and I think a lot of people in the community have woken up to the fact, especially recently with the debacles we had with Jacob Gate, etc., and all nodes and various other things. I'm not going to go over it all again. But the reality is, for all the criticism of all nodes having their level of voting power, I personally believe that there should be a cap put on any individual validator of from 1% to 5%, or one vote per validator, etc. I know it won't be a popular one because, etc., but I believe that there is nefarious people involved who've accumulated. A lot of people have put it out there publicly. I'm not going to name names. Who are public, who are privately accumulating validators and spinning up validators fairly regularly, with a view to obtaining control over governance, and therefore ultimately, in quotes, the blockchain. To me, to preclude that and to prevent that, I think, and it's something I've discussed with others, I think that there should be some sort of form of proposal put forward where there's a limitation, a legal limitation placed upon how many validators one person can own within the chain, as one example. That it should be one validator per entity, be that a legal entity, an LLC, or a private
hence
individual
your
who's doing it off their own
hence your
back.
idea of the KYC. I understand that. Now, I don't doubt that somebody may or may not be trying to do that, right? I don't doubt that one bit. However, I'm like, gosh, if you have enough money to spin up another validator for Luna Classic, why not spin up another validator for another blockchain and spread out your risk? I mean, that's the smart thing to do if you want to turn a validator into a business, right?
I agree. The immediate impact to the individuals in question doing it financially must be quite hard, because, as we all know, it's not the road that's paved with gold to spin up a validator and suddenly the thousands and the millions of dollars. As I'm sure Matt sitting alongside on the panel there, and Diamond Hands, etc., would state, it's a slow progress perspective, that and a long game. But again, equally, if someone has funds at their disposal, well beyond anything I would have personally, um, I could understand the rationale in doing it the way that I've described it's been done. And I don't just describe it; I know it's been done. There's enough people who've stated it's been done out there, with a view to obtaining control of an entire blockchain, which has got a, a significantly high value. And that's why the day that they stop fighting, the day that all the nefarious factions do stop fighting, Jerry, and do stop trying to take control, is the day that I know that we've reached bottom. That there is no ladder to climb back up the way, because I've never known anyone, I repeat, as I said before, who fought so hard and so viciously over something that they put out on a daily basis has inherently zero value as a shit coin, as a meme coin, has no utility, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on and on and on. Why fight over something that's got no value then, boys? Why not just go off into the distant, sell your bags, do whatever you got to do, and go away? I think the answer's pretty apparent to even a blind man.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential in Luna Classic. And I think a lot of people have a lot of hope about this repeg idea that's coming up. What are your thoughts on that? And I don't know if you had the opportunity to listen to Redline's AMA that he had with Clan Mudhorn, I guess. I didn't hear it.
No, unfortunately, I was like a lot of other people banned from that, so we couldn't listen in. So I think that equated to about 60% of the current community.
Oh, I don't. I might be too. I did. He's gonna be on this podcast on Saturday though, so everyone will get to listen in on that. And I've gotten some good questions from Margic in the community, and he's fielding those questions as we speak. And we're going to be talking about that during the podcast. He's going to do his best to explain pretty deeply. But do you have an opinion about the repeg process in general? Because we've had several plans come out already. There was Alex's repeg idea, there was Zaradar's, then there was Duncan's. Uh, what do you think about repeg and USTC just in general in relationship to Lunk?
On again, a very personal level, some of these guys speaking a language that's way beyond my IQ. Um, I've tried reading through Duncan's stuff. It's certainly the Insomniac's Guide to the Universe, but the what Drifters come out with now is something I can actually grasp and probably get behind. And the simple fact is, I think we have to have some sort of form of direction as a group. The whole thing that galvanized us the last time round as a group, as a community, was the burn. We all know that that ain't getting us where we have to go, right? But it was a great narrative, and it was pushed, and it pumped it, and a lot of people made quite a bit of money. I wasn't one of them. I had all my stuff staked. I still have. I'm still 100% staked. I've not sold one single lunk that I've bought to date. But the repeg to me, especially in the current climate with what's going on with the SEC, with what's going on with the world in general, I think it really, and Margic's put up some great stuff the last few days of the stuff that's been going on, and Gary Gensler getting the rightful absolute scrutiny placed upon him that he should have done. But I think the American public are now waking up to the fact that they've been sold a dummy. And I think stablecoins, if it proves correct, we've already got something that's been tried, tested badly. Okay, let's all acknowledge the fact that the elephant in the room. It did fail. It did depeg, and it cost a lot of people a hell of a lot of money. But I think that is primarily one of the things that we should progress further, and it would certainly glean my support to look into it on the premise that it wasn't driven by people with self-interest at heart again, that they were doing it genuinely with a view to recovering the chain, putting us back in a position where we could get to. But I think it's probably the most likely route currently, unless someone comes up with something markedly different, because at this juncture we don't have an identity as a blockchain, and by definition we don't have a clear consensus of opinion amongst the community of where we're going or what we're doing. So it could be a unifying factor that we really have needed for the last few months. So yeah, in principle, it gets my vote, at least to investigate it.
Right. I agree with that. The I'm looking at it and I'm thinking like we all know we have a little bit of a roller coaster when it comes to the drama that you brought up, right? However, I think the chart, once there is if we are successful with the repeg, hang on tight because there's going to be some ups and downs and all arounds coming down range, and I think there's just going to be more incentive to trade, which would increase volume, right? I'm just these are assumptions of mine, right? And if we repeg, do a soft repeg, and then do it step by step, doing it something like that, there's going to constantly be a push up in some volume, and it's just up down up down up down because there are a lot of people that got screwed with the USTC, and they might actually try to liquidate their position if it goes up to a certain level, right? So I'm not sure. I think it's going to be quite a ride, though.
Well, the only thing I'll give away on a personal level is that I've been accumulating USTC for the last few months. So that might give you a hint as to what my mindset is.
So you're ready for the ride.
I haven't got lots of it. I've not got millions of it, but I've quietly been accumulating my little rewards and not getting transferred back into Lunk like they were before. So yeah, slowly but surely.
Yep, I get that. I mean, I think it'll be interesting. It can certainly burn a lot more Luna Classic potentially. So there's that.
There's another thing that again I've sort of I try and look at things outside of the box, if you like, and possibly in a different manner that some people do. Myself and one of possibly their biggest protagonist being me, and my biggest protagonist being them. I won't mention them by name. I don't even know if they're in the room. Possibly are, possibly not. But we actually reached consensus or agreement about something a while back, and this would take potentially years to achieve. So it probably wouldn't go down well with the Moon Boys who want us to be back to $1 within 6 months or whatever else. Which whether we go down the UST route, etc., isn't happening. By the way, folks, patience is virtue. Um, but because of the latent history that we have of the crash, which was the overaccumulation of Lunk and the minting of it, and having 6 trillion of the stuff sitting about, and people don't really comprehend that number in its entirety. That is a lot. I started thinking, well, is there other ways in which we could approach this issue? And for mass adoption, as everyone knows, it's still not the easiest thing to be involved in crypto, i.e., on ramp, off ramp. You've got to jump through hoops, learn how to jump through those hoops, absolutely take your life in your hands when you're transferring from MetaMask to your wallet to this to your hard wallet, and all the other ins and outs. We all know it's not what your average man in the street wants to do or would be comfortable doing. It's for the semi-degens and the real degens of this world that get involved in it, because it's still a difficult process to go through. If we could achieve mass adoption, i.e., have a really easy means on ramp, off ramp, I think that would really position us as probably a chain, and it's something that I've pushed actively for a long time. Other than tech parity, I've always stated the next thing we should have, or we should concentrate on, was on ramp, off ramp. The sooner you make it easy for people to jump in, jump out, the more adoption you'll get, the more volume you'll get, inherently the more interest you'll get, etc., etc. And the trading and the gas fees would come into play far more in that context. But one idea, and I'd have to dive into my tweets, but I had it as a pinned post for a while, and it actually got positive plaudits from as I say, one of my pals out there. Was I sat and I looked at it in a different way, and I thought, well, there's other currencies which I was invested in prior to Lunk who were trying to achieve a similar thing, which was create a reserve currency, as opposed to the US dollar. And they were doing it in different ways, but I bought into it, bought into the concept, bought into the idea, and I bought a lot of their tokens. One of them I had, I think at the time, doesn't sound a lot by comparison to what I've got in Lunk, but about 500,000 or something like that at one point in time. And they were trying to do it on it was similar to a stable coin in that it wasn't based off one currency. It was like a basket of currencies that they were using, etc. But they had got it to the stage where it was reasonably well adopted in quite a number of South American countries. which traditionally, as most people will know, a lot of them have experienced hyperinflation or, borderline hyperinflation, which is basically any country that trades for in excess of a 3-year period at 33% above, like your GDP, etc., whatever. But I thought, well, hang on, they've already got it down to a credit card, debit card situation where these people can go in and use that currency within a shop to buy their groceries, go to the chemist and buy their drug, whatever they need, their gas, etc., etc. And I thought, well, why can't we do something similar with use our volume of tokens to, possibly an opposite effect? And I thought, well, what about looking at all the countries with hyperinflation? And when I narrowed it down to the sort of like the top 10 or so countries with hyperinflation in the world, um, the everyone would probably assume they're all in Africa. They're not. They're actually split across the world. But between them, they had a population of in excess of 25% of the United States, which was pro rata about 460 million people, thereabouts. Now, my basic idea, a very simplistic idea, was that if you took that you had a volume market who were experiencing years and years and years of financial just Armageddon, essentially, the money in their pocket could be worth, 1 cent one day and 100 cents the next day, and everything in between. It's that volatile. It could cost them a mortgage to buy a house could then be what cost them to buy bread the next day. That's the sort of level that we're talking at here. And I thought if we were able to create something with an on ramp, off ramp, utilizing the peg of some description, I threw a figure in of like 10 cents, or something, to repeg it to 10 cents, not necessarily a dollar, and that we could approach these countries with something approaching a far less volatile financial environment than their own currencies, that we might receive widespread adoption that way. Now, again, it would require far cleverer people than myself, economists and financiers, etc., to get behind that sort of idea. But I wasn't that far off the mark to somebody who, in quotes, some people laud in the community, some people don't laud. But they approached me and said, well, actually, we'd written a paper about this to introduce this, as in lunk, to the African continent. So maybe that's another idea for the community. Another thing that I don't think we have
So
enough
you,
of
so you want us
is
to go
an
to war with
identity.
Cardano?
Um, yeah, in a word, yeah. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't have as good or a better argument than they do with what we have at our disposal. And it's just a reverse engineered way of, well, what we've got this 6 million trunk of coins, tokens, whatever you want to call it, currency. If we could find a reasonably efficient way for people to on and off ramp it, why not approach countries who have historically experienced far greater volatility than we currently experience within their own currencies? And as long as they can spend it, and again, that's where you're looking at volume, um, daily volume of transactions would go through the absolute roof.
Yeah, that's a hell of a use case.
Forget worrying about burns. You would burn down a frazzle. You probably have to look at reminting at some juncture. But again, it's just one of a broad ideas that I had in my head, and ironically, it was agreed with in principle by parties that don't always agree with me. Let's put it that way.
Gotcha. I think I interrupted you when I said Cardano. What, you were going down a different direction? Do you remember it?
Yeah, well, another route, and again, but when you see these arguments that's ongoing, when the SEC can't agree what's a security and what's a commodity, you shake your head. The head of the SEC. And another thing that I thought of was that at the end of the day, altcoins essentially are tradable commodity, currency, but if you look at Forex as an example, aren't the daily volume in crypto is fractional by comparison to what's traded in the Forex markets daily. Now, if you look at the Forex market, there's daily transactional values of 7 trillion a day. Yeah. And again, my uneducated brain thought, well, okay, and there's only in quotes about 100, I think it's 124, 126 currencies traded within that framework daily. So the mind boggles. And I thought, well, everyone's arguing about reserve currency, and I know this is fantastical, and I'm thinking, Jupiter to Mars leap and jump of thought, thought process. But I thought again, why not go, or why not research whether that would be an alternative for us to go down, to divorce ourselves from necessarily the broad crypto market and go into a currency market and compete against these guys. Again, it's fantastical. I know it sounds weird, but no more fantastical than some of the stuff I've read about repegs. So equally
Right. I don't. Yeah, I'm not the expert on that side. I wouldn't know. That would be interesting though, because you said some papers have been written about it. Now you're talking about um, introducing cryptocurrency to countries that have experienced hyperinflation. Uh, an example, Venezuela did, right? They're kind of utilizing Bitcoin.
correct.
So other countries, obviously, but maybe try to create a good use case for a country to adopt, whether it's USTC or Luna Classic, for example, or something, right, that they can utilize. Um, okay.
Correct.
I mean, what, do you remember where the papers are located? Are they publicly available, or is it something I have to pay
In
for?
terms of my own, I wouldn't even describe it as a paper. It was about probably an eight, tweet, sort of tweet, if you want to put it that way, as regards to. I'm happy to say it was Ox had put forward. He actually enlightened me when I put out my tweet. He says, "Oh, we're sort of in agreement for one sort of situation." I went, "Oh, okay," and they had actually put it forward, I believe, as an idea to I think it was the African Congress or some a body of that ilk, um, suggesting that it could be an entire continent's, but there are wealthy countries in Africa. Everyone pins, for example, when you talk about hyperinflation, everyone would think that every country that's got hyperinflation, albeit there's a few, Ethiopia being a classic example, Somalia, these sort of countries are in that frame. But there's other countries that are more developed that have got horrendous issues with hyperinflation. Venezuela being an example, you know. But yeah, their basic idea and my basic idea was very similar in the on ramp off ramp element, making that easy, having a situation where people can literally as they do now transact with a card in a shop or when they're buying their gas or otherwise. That's when you'll see mass adoption. Now, if you get mass adoption on a country level, then your volumes are going to go through the roof. Even if you took it and you take America as one isolated example, America's got a population, I think, in and around 360, 380 million people. Those 10 countries, top countries of the world with hyperinflation, have 25% greater mass volume population wise than the United States in its entirety. So can you imagine the whole of the United States adopting crypto tomorrow or the day after? The
And paying for
volumes
gas
of
with it?
yeah, and the volume of transactions involved would be colossal, mind blowing.
That's a good point. That's very interesting, and I'm wondering now. I'm not a huge Cardano fan. Somebody asked me about Cardano yesterday, and I never have been a huge Cardano fan, right? Um, but I'm wondering if that's what they were thinking when they decided to focus on the continent of Africa, right?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any doubt that was in their mindset. Like the company that I invested in before, and the token hasn't really gained traction. They did a few things which they shouldn't have done. The usual story within crypto, and it took 5 steps back when it had taken 5 steps forward to the situation. But their general idea, and I read their paper inside out, upside down, looked at the technical stuff. Was that's what I bought into. I did my research. I tried to identify companies that I equated had value and had an actual genuine product, weren't just a shitcoin, etc. But that was their basic idea, was gaining mass acceptance as a reserve currency in countries which historically had had issues with hyperinflation.
And that would provide stability, or at least an
Absolutely.
extra stability. Now,
Well,
would they you still do it? Like if it happened in Luna Classic, I'm imagining you said a basket of other assets. Would it look like something a little bit different where you would have other assets involved?
possibly. I'm a firm believer in the KISS principle, Jerry, and I think that's where I'll rephrase what I was about to say. I believe in KISS principle. It's what I was brought up with in sales, which is keep it simple, stupid. In other words, unless you can explain something in language that a 5-year-old can understand, then you've got a problem. And we've got an overarching amount of people that can put forward these fantastical theories and whatever else. But when the average person sits down and tries to read them, at the end of it, and I believe I've got a reasonably high IQ, and I'm still left scratching my head half the time as to what exactly is involved. But with regards to the idea of getting mass adoption through it being a reserve currency, I would just place it upon Lunk and USTC. I wouldn't necessarily involve lots of, as for example, as we all know, because anyone who stakes knows that our rewards are made up of stuff that has no inherent current value in all the other currencies that are in there. But I'm not I'm not really best placed, or from a professional level to give that answer because I don't have the answers as to what the best way forward with that would be in truth.
Yeah, I gotcha. Definitely understand. So, I mean, do you want to move on to another Luna Classic topic?
Um, yeah, I think possibly one that other than what we've just discussed, I think an identity is something that we need to hang our hats on in terms of what do we really want, who do we really want to be? What do we intrinsically what or how can we make our blockchain stand out from any other?
Yeah, what's our niche? I agree with you because when you look at the grand scheme of things, there's only so much market share to share. So you either competing with the likes of Cardano, or you're competing with Ethereum, or you're competing with this, or you set up a niche. Whereas, yeah, we do the same thing that Ethereum does and all these other blockchains do, but we really focus on this one little niche, whether it's AI or that because Ed's doing that. That's why I brought that up, or if it's something else like gaming or whatever it is, right?
Correct. It's probably the best analogy. I was speaking to somebody about it not very long ago, and probably the best analogy I could give them was if you take Amazon as an example of a successful corporate entity, over 60% of Amazon sales are made historically in the last 10 years and probably longer by what they call third party sellers. I know that because I was one of them. And these are people in varying degrees, from very low levels, small mom and pop stores that they create on Amazon to major conglomerates who go in and are putting, multiple 8 figures and plus beyond in their investment. But the point I'm trying to convey is the following, and that is that there's no point chasing, a market that doesn't exist. And therefore, your initial research before you go on the ones who are successful on Amazon on a resale basis are the ones who identify a niche that there's already a known want and demand. And then the next stage they go and look at is they look at who's selling the most, why they're selling the most, and they look into the key chronological element of it, reviews. And whatever, they'll look through all the bad reviews. Let's say it's silicon spatula, and Joe Blogg's silicon spatulas has been selling 10 million of them every month for the last XYZ. It doesn't mean they're insurmountable, because the guy comes in behind them, goes and looks and sees that within all their negative reviews, they were flimsy, the handles weren't this or this wasn't that. They identify issues with the actual product, and then all they do is they go to a manufacturer and say, right, can you produce this X, Y, and Z for X, pennies and dollars for me? And if they can do it for less money, and not even necessarily less money, but if they can do a better job in a market that already has a demand, a want, and a demand structure, then that's what they go after, and that's what we're failing to do. What we should really do is have a think tank of people who go out and identify the most successful current usages within, use cases within crypto, i.e., gaming as one example. I'm not a gamer. I don't come from that background. It doesn't hold that much interest. Same with NFTs. Apologise to yourself, Jerry. It's just a genre I've not gone into. I'm not just saying anything bad about them. It's just not my thing. But if someone turned around and told me that gaming was, has 60% of the market, it doesn't require a huge amount of capital to get into it, and if you make slight tweaks to certain things, you can go into a sub niche of a niche of a niche. But that's where we're failing. We don't know we're rudderless. We don't know what market we're trying to target, or whether we go all hands in on DeFi products. Personally, that wouldn't be my route. I would feel far more comfortable with things like gaming and an actual product like that. But yeah, that identify a think tank to identify what the best niche or niches, plural, that we should possibly identify as a blockchain, and then go all out on a marketing and sales perspective to encourage these people to come to our chain and devise ways, as lots of people are discussing as we speak, ways that we can incentivize people to come and build on our chain. So first identify who the best people, what that marketplace is, and then go after them.
I mean, there's definitely, if you look worldwide, because I think that's what we're going to have to do. If you want mass adoption, you can't just go for regional areas, right? If you look worldwide, just what you said, what if there was a Amazon where point of sale with Luna Classic or USTC existed on Luna Classic blockchain, where people could create their own businesses and get paid in Lunk and pay in Lunk? That would be cool. Or good, it could also not just goods, but it could also be services, like a Fiverr type of situation. But then go after the people that have these skill sets. Here's just another way that you can diversify what you already do. You're utilizing Fiverr, you're utilizing this, but if you want to jump into crypto and you want to start getting paid in crypto, here's a way you can do it. I think, and I'm, maybe somebody runs with that idea. I'm not going to build it, guys. So like, run with it. I don't care. But it's not. I think these things have been discussed before, though, haven't they?
I think people have touched on it. Obviously, to build something like you said would take time, effort, and energy, and probably not an insignificant amount of money would be required as well. But I think my own personal opinion is that I think until such time as we decide who we are and what we are, then we're going to struggle. I think we really have to give and have an open conversation, not factions against factions, but if that's possible in Lunkers at this juncture, I don't know. But to have some sort of community consensus is that, well, let's look at research, let's look at what are the big players within crypto. What are the ones that are big just now going to be big tomorrow? Do we want to put all our eggs in one basket into gaming? If gaming might be something that might be I don't know. That's the principal question that needs to be answered is looking at where there's a demand and whether we could supply that demand.
Honestly, think other areas are probably more likely than just gaming alone. I think there's still going to be some people building games. You know, once the blockchain is full parity and everything's working good, right, and people are starting to get attracted, I think games will just happen, right? But I don't think it's going to be the necessarily the number one. However, with gaming, it's very attractive that the gas fees are low, right? Because gaming on Ethereum as a player, and I've played games, imagine all the transactions that you might have to deal with during a game on a blockchain that has high gas fees. You could be broke by the end of your Twitch stream. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that therein lies. Do we want to be the cheapest blockchain to transact on? The cheapest transactional. So we appeal to all bodies and all men, and all women that were and all singing, all dancing. But again, that can be dangerous as well if you don't, sort of go down a more specific route.
I think we could incentivize, and I don't, guys, I'm not in charge of anything here. This is just me thinking. I think we could potentially incentivize applications like gaming or complex applications where there's multiple transactions where they pay a lower fee in gas or something, or it's more minimal for them specifically to attract them over, or maybe give them a grace period of like, hey, for the first 3 years, you have this deal, and that way they can be more successful. Who knows? Like, there's all kinds of things that can be done. And Zaradar touched on this, finding our niche or finding what we're about. I remember that. That was a couple months ago.
Yeah, and I was listening again. It was a good thing that they did on YouTube the other night with him and Trevor. It was interesting to listen to again some of the perspectives and whatever else. And I think we still I maintain one intrinsic thing, and that is my belief that we have something of value, that we just haven't got our direction, our compass right just yet. But I believe that when we do get our compass right and we set our sails in whichever direction we end up going in, that, as you've used the expression before, Jerry, fasten your seatbelts. I really believe that it will take off.
Absolutely, I agree. We just have to find it, right? And it's not going to be easy. I think there's going to be some hiccups along the way, and there's going to be some disappointments. But what is your outlook? Let's outlook for Luna Classic over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, just in general. Like, where do you see it going, and what do you? This is a long shot, man, but what do you see that we could potentially achieve?
I would say that, and again, I try and temper everything with realism. Hopium, I hope we're at $1 by tomorrow, but it ain't happening. The reality is, I believe that we will start to see an increase in the next few months, because what a lot of people, fail to take into consideration when they're tweeting every day, why have we dropped, or why is this? World events around us, we don't live in a bubble. At the end of the day, we're as open to the impacts of world events as anyone else is, and that's why the price will rise and fall, in the short to medium term. But I believe that the L1 dev team gaining parity, tech parity, will give us a strong foundation. And that's all we're talking about. Before, we were basically working from foundations built on a deck of cards, or on sand. If we've got something where we can say, well, look, guys, we can do everything as well as everyone else, then we can start marketing ourselves, and inherently price will rise. How long do I think it will take us to get there? I'd be lying if I said, but I would think, conservatively speaking, you're probably talking in years as opposed to weeks or months, to hit the real heights again. That's my own personal perspective.
Well, I'm just as hopeful as you are. So, any last words?
None, my friend. I've struggled to give you a full hour's worth of conversation, but thank you for giving me the time and to come up and speak to you and speak to everyone else. And I just wish and I hope for ultimately us all to be successful together. And I genuinely believe, and I wouldn't be here otherwise, that I just have that weird. It's something that's an intangible. I've discussed it with various different people, and they know what I'm talking about because they feel the same way. There's something intangible I can't explain in the ether, wherever, that is holding me to this blockchain and its fortunes. There's something that keeps me here. So, what it is, hopefully, history will show me with a big bright light because I just don't know yet. But again, I wish everyone in the room every success. And long may we continue as a community to grow together.
Oh, I want to thank everybody that joined us today and listened to DST. We're going to have another one of these on Saturday with Redline Drifter. You all know he's going to be talking about what he's got on Agora with the repeg. So it's going to be repeg talk all day Saturday. And I'm also going to get a shout out there to Matt's Market. He's right next to DST on my screen. I'm going to reach out to you because I know you got something on Agora or you're going to post something on Agora soon. And I want to give you the opportunity to get that out to the community as well. Thanks, DST, for coming on today. It was awesome. Definitely appreciate your time.